Okay, like it or not, power scaling is almost the compulsory accompaniment to any story, comic, manga, book, movie, show that contains any form of fighting. Be it alongside a power system, a magic system, any unique abilities, power rankings, different hierarchies in organizations, you'll find that a part of any fandom of any such series will be discussing or arguing or straight up fighting each other over who is stronger in that series, and then that extends beyond the borders of the story where fandoms come together or clash heads over whose character from their respective story is stronger. And thus, you can tell from the way I worded those first few sentences and from the title of the video that there is most definitely more, or at least two ways to power scale. So this video will have two parts, and in the effort of ending on a high note, I will begin with the toxic side of power scaling and end on the fun side. And you may find that there's a discrepancy in size between the two sections, but don't worry, there's a good reason for that. Power scaling is a very deep subject, unironically. It's not as simple as saying this character can be that character, but instead it's way more detailed. This means that a lot of research is needed for you to work out how strong or fast a character is, which then means pulling out some decently high level equations and calculations to try and come to the most accurate answer you possibly can. Or even if you are sticking to characters within one particular series, each and every one of those characters' actions will be painstakingly studied to deduce their level of strength in comparison to the other. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot that goes into this. And I also want to say, if you are ignorant to the dark side of power scaling, I highly recommend you skip straight to the part of this video that discusses the fun side of power scaling, because I don't want to be responsible for you falling down a rabbit hole about the hidden horrors of power scaling. Remember, ignorance is bliss. Obviously, not all power scalers are like this. They're not all bad. Also, half the stuff I wanted to say I couldn't even put to words at first until I watched this video, which is definitely better than my video. So after you watch this, and if you enjoy it, go watch that one. So starting with the toxic side, and my first point, some people take power scaling so seriously that it inevitably ruins the actual story for themselves and others. With this, I'm referring to both crossover power scaling and in-universe power scaling. Everyone has their preferences over which series or stories that they prefer over the other, but once power scaling is added to the mix, some select individuals would, for some reason, decide to hate on another series because in a popular matchup their character loses to another. An example? For crossover power scaling, let's use Goku versus Superman, the debate on power scaling. Because yeah, at first, what a matchup, but in the end, Superman always wins. I'm talking about comic Superman, of course, who can sneeze away a solar system. And some Goku fans can't fathom the thought of Goku losing, so they take their hatred out on poor old Superman, who was forced into this situation by us. And then an example from power scaling in one story. I'll go with Shanks versus Mihawk. This argument is so frustrating because we don't actually have a definitive answer with this one, and people on both sides flat out hate the other character thanks to this. And with One Piece being a battle shonen, strength does matter, but unfortunately power scalers decide to take that and try to make the story revolve around this one fight, because both Shanks and Mihawk have very close ties to the stories of our main cast, so that hatred for either character can boil over to the rest of the story. So what I'm saying is you are pretty much arguing with yourself and you're ruining your own fun. Next point. Every single person has their own bias. The best power scaling matchup is a close power scaling matchup. One that is on a knife edge. It can go either way, but we all have our opinions, so we will each have our own interpretation of the outcome and who comes out on top. There may be a lot of facts and calculations, but revisiting the Goku vs Superman and Shanks vs Mihawk matchups, the people who like Mihawk more than Shanks will side with Mihawk. The people who like Goku more than Superman will side with Goku, because they have favourites. Now that doesn't seem bad at first, does it? We all have favourites. The problem comes when those same people somehow view their biases as truth and no matter what, don't back down even if they are proven wrong. I mean, the amount of threads or comment sections that I have seen devolve into nothing but insults is ridiculous. The original post or video or whatever might not have even said anything bad or controversial. Just the reasoning why a certain character would win the fight and any replies against them would just be people throwing school level, playground level insults about the original person's intelligence or lack thereof because they don't agree, and they won't say anything related to power scaling or the matchup, probably because they know their preferred character loses and their bias and very very fragile ego, I'll add to that, just refuses to accept that. And now the last point on the toxic side. It's not that deep, man, really, and we don't care. Now for this point I'm talking more specifically on the interactions between hardcore power scalers and non-power scalers, and this kind of links back to my first point about ruining the story, and it also kind of links to the second point. I realize everything I've said now kind of links together, but we've already gotten this far, so let's just continue. So from the non-power scalers point of view, there are times, and when I say times I mean many times, the hardcore power scaler looks like a crazy crackpot conspiracy theorist weirdo who is just looking to pick a fight for no reason. Say a fight happens in a story, or it's just a hypothetical matchup between two random characters. The non-power scaler would probably think it was a cool fight and move on. But the hardcore power scaler, he will not let it go. He will, even if they agree with the outcome of the fight, they will do everything in their power to make sure you understand what's happened, why it's happened, when 9 times out of 10, the author or the person who made the fight did not intend any of that. And it's like, now this thing isn't something that's exclusive to power scaling, but it's like they just want validation over something that does not matter. And everyone around them is trying their hardest to avoid eye contact, the same way you avoid eye contact with that homeless man asking for money while you are stuck in traffic. So that's the toxic side of power scaling. At its absolute worst, it's down there with the shipping community as some of the worst parts of any fandom. But it's not all bad. Thankfully there is a bright side to accompany all of that darkness. I'm not going to split this up into separate points like I did before, but rather I'm just going to talk here. So the good side of power scaling, it's just fun. It's as simple as that. The reason why this section on why power scaling is fun is so short is because the reasoning is so simple. I mean, the idea of putting two strong characters into the ring with each other who otherwise haven't interacted with each other and never will. It's like creating your own entertainment because there's an infinite number of matchups you can create with an infinite number of characters. Everyone obviously still has their own biases, as I mentioned before, but most power scalers aren't full-grown man babies who don't stop crying. Because of one major reason, I'm not taking it or myself too seriously. And power scaling can also be fun sometimes because we've all heard of the phrases, can he beat Goku though? And how much prep time does Batman get? These things used to be serious questions I think in power scaling, but now we bring those things up as a joke and we laugh because guess what? Again, we are having fun and not taking things too seriously. And also, I don't apply power scaling to everything. That, I think, is one of the downsides to some people and power scaling. They think power scaling takes precedence over anything else. Like, I could not care less about what the Toon Force of Gear 5 means in terms of power scaling because that's not the point of Gear 5. When I see SpongeBob unraveling reality, I don't go into defense mode, you know what I mean? When someone says SpongeBob unironically stomps my favorite character, I'm not going to start an argument or start crying because it's just fun and games. And look, I'm able to separate two things, the story and power scaling. Listen, even crunching the numbers and using high-level equations is great. So power scaling takes physics and mathematics as an essential aspect. I hated maths and physics in college, and I'm sure many of you aren't the biggest fans of those subjects either, meaning power scaling did something that no one else could. It made me enjoy those two things again, and I would argue that that is the greatest feat of them all.